speak on 3 points and using this whiteboard as for writing some things and drawing some things. So I offer a sip of wisdom. When we drink something in a sip, then we gently take a little bit of it. So the same theme, I'll offer 3 points for reflection, which will also address some of our common questions that we may have. Broadly speaking, there are 2 kinds of people in the world. Some people are wise and some are otherwise. And it's not just that these 2 kinds of people are there in the world. Many times we ourselves oscillate between being wise and otherwise. Especially, say, if we have to give some advice to others. At that time, we are sometimes ourselves surprised at the pearls of wisdom that seem to come out of our mouths. And maybe somebody should record this, maybe I should write a book. And yet, if we are provoked by something, if somebody angers us, somebody agitates us, at that time we start speaking things. Hey, why do I speak that? Afterwards, if somebody would play a recording of what we spoke in anger, you wonder, what is this? How could I have spoken something like this? So, science has explored many of the mysteries of the universe. And what it has found has transformed human society. At the same time, no mystery is as immediately relevant to us as our own inner world, as what goes on inside our inner world. What impels us to do the things that we do. These are questions that come to us when, say, if not we ourselves, but with someone around us, maybe our children, maybe our colleagues, they behave in unexpected ways, in unhealthy ways. It raises the question, what's going on? So, Martin Luther King, the American civil rights leader, put his finger on the problem when he said that we have guided missiles and misguided men. We have guided missiles. We have been able to control our outer world to an astonishing degree. And yet, there is something inside us, maybe not inside us as specifically we, but us collectively as humanity, which seems to impel us to act against our best interests. And it is this that we will be trying to explore today. I'll start with briefly my spiritual journey, and then I'd like to ask you, what does spirituality mean to you before I go into the 3 points of SIP, SIP. So as I mentioned in the introduction, I studied engineering, and throughout my childhood and my youth, I had a lot of faith in the power of education. Education can open new doors. Education can enable us to achieve new things, help usher in a better world. And that's why while I was pursuing education, I was also trying to share with others. When I finished my 10th, I started a free tuition for students who were just going to give the 10th exam, to give them some broad tips. When I was studying my engineering, I joined a social welfare organization where I was a part of that organization which pioneered the education for the underprivileged in the slum areas. And while I was going there, I noticed that the kids were okay, they were interested in studying, but their homes were dysfunctional. There was alcohol abuse, there was domestic violence. And then I started thinking, how much is the education of, say, history or maths or geography going to help them when they are living in troubled homes? So then we decided to diversify into de-addiction, especially helping people recover from alcoholism. And to a small degree, we were fairly successful. We called some campaigners to talk, we asked them the principles. And then the small section of the slums where we were trying to share, everybody in that locality resolved to give up alcohol. An American thinker, Oscar Wilde, he has stated that giving up smoking is the easiest thing in the world. I have done it over 100 times. So, we give it up, but he doesn't give us up. So this is what unfortunately became the harsh reality that I experienced. That I went to my home for vacations, and when I came back, I found that many of them had relapsed. And why had they relapsed? Because the local politician who was seeking candidature for the municipality elections had brought a truckload of liquor to woo the candidates and offered it free. And not only the parents and the fathers, not only the parents, but even the kids had started drinking. So that's when I started thinking that if you consider the journey of life through education, we are opening fresh doors. So we open doors through education. But it seems there are some kind of trap doors which open and people fall into those trap doors. So these trap doors are inside us. And these trap doors don't have to be the substance abuse. They can just be, as I discussed, a short temper. They can be being too moody. They can be just being too harsh or impolite or demanding or rude. Basically, we do things which we know we shouldn't be doing, and then they hurt us. So, and I observed this not just in the slum areas where people were less educated, but I observed it among the students in my college also. I was studying on the better colleges in India, and yet I found that the same tendency is there. So that is when I started reading more and more about the inner world. I explored psychology, philosophy, and eventually I came to spirituality. And that's where I came across the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita, I came across a worldview that helped make sense of the inner world, of human behavior as I was encountering it in me and as I was encountering the others. And in fact, this was not just a model, but I found that this was strikingly similar to what I had observed in science. The scientific method had something which was so universal, intuitively appealing. We postulated theory and we then evaluated through experiments. So I found spirituality as relatively similar. And that's what inspired me so much eventually that I decided that this is what I would like to study and share. So I will talk about what I learned from the Bhagavad Gita. about spirituality and about life in general. But before I go ahead, I'd like to ask you, would any of you like to share what spirituality means to you? Our topic today is science and spirituality. So what does spirituality mean to you? Do we have a mic by any chance? Yes. Would anyone like to share?
Thank you. To me, actually, spirituality, I think to think about the creation of the earth or universe and believe that someone behind the creation. And I think to me, spirituality means going to temple think to serve the people, to be honest, to be good, to do good work.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that 2 minute explanation. Like there is an underlying reality, some kind of divinity, the existence, and then that understanding of the underlying divinity inspires us to some kind of virtuous living, where we are service oriented, where we want to do good to our fellow livings. Thank you. Anything else? Any other thoughts about what spirituality is?
I think spirituality is the way to be situated in our constitutional position.
Okay, that's a good way of putting it. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a way, we can say, to be who we are, who we really are, what our actual identity is, who we essentially are, how we can become or realize who we are. That is spirituality. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, please. You have a here.
Thank you so much, Hare Krishna. It's for me, it's like a beyond materialistic world where I can have a peace of my mind. That's what spirituality means to me.
Oh, thank you. That's very good. That beyond materialism toward peace of mind. We may have a lot of materialistic things, but it doesn't take us much time to realize that a lot of possessions does not necessarily mean a lot of peace. In fact, sometimes the more externals we pursue, the more it seems that peace becomes illusory. It's so, what is it that we can pursue something beyond matter? So that is spiritual. In some ways, the material things in the world are constantly changing. So is there something beyond this changing, something which is unchanging? And if we can hold on to the unchanging, then we can be peaceful. Yes, thank you. Anyone else?
Spirituality helps us to the real meaning of our life and find out the forces inside us.
Find
out the force.
out what's inside us.
Inside us.
So it is, we find at one level meaning in life, and then we also find that there are some greater strength, greater force inside us. There's a lot within us that is untapped, undiscovered, and spirituality helps us discover that. Yes. Thank you. Anyone? Last answer? Anyone?
Hare Krishna. I think spirituality means to get the correct answer about who am I, why I am suffering here, and how can I stop this suffering. If there is any God,
where he lives, what is our relation with God, and how can I establish my connection with God. Consideration of this symptom, of these questions, actually means author to Brahma Jigyasa, and this study, I think, this is the actual spirituality. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So there are life's fundamental questions. Who am I really? Why do I exist? Why does happiness seem to elude me? So questions like these, spirituality is what often people search for to get answers to these. So these are all very valid and valuable points. I'll try to integrate them as we move forward in our discussion today. So broadly speaking, spirituality is similar to science. And there are of course some significant differences also. But science is the study of matter. And spirituality is the study of what matters. The study of matter and the study of what matters. The study of what is really important in life. What will count actually. Now matter can also count, but is there something more that matters? Like I mentioned that sometimes we have possessions, but they may not provide us peace. Then what really matters in life? If we have a lot but we lack peace of mind, then maybe possessions they matter, but they don't matter that much. So it is the study of what matters. In the Bhagavad Gita was spoken, Arjuna was facing a crisis of what really matters in life. And it was the answer to this question of what matters that was given in the Bhagavad Gita. So, the study of what matters, like I said, science has these two aspects, theory, where some aspects of reality we try to explain by postulating some hypothesis. And then we do some experiments to try to test whether that particular hypothesis is true or not. Similarly, spirituality also has two aspects to it. One is philosophy, which is similar to the theory aspect. And then we have practice. Now within the practice, religion is what also comes in. So actually speaking, the practice aspect of spirituality is similar to the experiment aspect of science. So spirituality is the study of what matters. This means first there is a philosophy, there is a way of looking at the world that is provided within spirituality. And that helps us look at the various aspects of reality and it tells us what really matters. And then the practice aspect of spirituality helps us do certain activities, certain practices by which we can evaluate for ourselves. Does this really matter? Does this really make a positive difference in my life? So the study of what matters. Through science, we have explored our outer world. And through science itself, one thing that humanity has found is that the world is far more complex than what it seems to our naked eyes. That when we look at the sky, we might just see an endless expanse of white in the daytime or endless expanse of black at the night. But we understand that the space is filled with astonishing wonders. If you look at the universe at its micro level, we find that even the atoms have a whole universe within them in terms of subatomic particles. Even the cells within the human body are so complex. So there is much, much more to reality than what meets the eye. So spirituality tells us the same principle that what matters is much more important than what we see. In fact, if you consider what scientific progress means. Now, when I had gone to Cambridge, as I mentioned in the introduction, that we passed by the same tree where Newton is said to have got his defining insight. The apple fell. Some people say it fell in front of him, some people say it fell on him. Now, when the apple fell on him, imagine if instead of Newton, a monkey had been sitting there. Now, what might the monkey have done? Most likely, he's taken the apple and eaten it. But Newton asked him, hey, what made this apple fall? And that question led to the development of science. So now he came up with the theory of gravity. But if you see, essentially what is happening is there is a visible phenomenon. The visible phenomenon was that an apple fell. But from that, he came to the postulation of an invisible principle. So sometimes people say seeing is believing. Well, if you really believe that seeing is believing, then stop using your cell phone. Because the whole cell phone operates based on the concept of the internet, the electromagnetic communication. And the electromagnetic waves are invisible. The internet is invisible. So scientific advancement essentially happens by looking beyond visible to the invisible. So we move from visible principles to invisible principles. And that is what I'm going to talk about the second part over here. I said I'll take 3 points in terms of the acronym SIP, a sip of wisdom. So spirituality is the study of what matters. And then I is intelligence. So intelligence means that there are things that glitter, things that are visible, and beyond them there are things that matter. So intelligence is the capacity to see beyond what glitters to what matters. It's like in youth, when somebody wants to form a relationship, people often go by externals. How attractive somebody looks or how wealthy somebody looks. And that's an important feature to look at. But if you want to be in a long-term relationship, the looks are important, but the character of the person is much more important. If a person is constantly complaining, if a person is manipulative, if a person is untrustworthy, then however good they may look, they cannot very well be a person with whom we can have a satisfying or sustainable relationship. So basically, if we look at reality, there is the appearance, how things look, that is what often glitters, and beyond that, there is the substance. And intelligence is the capacity to see beyond appearance to substance, to see beyond what glitters to what matters. Science progresses in the same way. Every scientific theory, in fact, is a movement from the visible phenomena to an invisible principle. And that same point is applied in spirituality with respect to the point of philosophy. The word philosophy itself means phili and sophos. Phili is love, sophos is truth. Allow for truth. What is the actual nature of reality? And the Bhagavad explains that the same point that there are two layers to reality. There is a material reality, and underlying that there is a spiritual reality. Nasato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataha. It's the material, it is constantly changing. There's a Greek philosopher, Sophocles, who said that we never step into the same river twice. Because the river is made of flowing water and constantly changing. So, of the material, there is constant change. Our body is constantly changing. Cells are being born, cells are dying. So, the material is constantly changing. But beyond the material, there is something that is unchanging. And that is the spiritual. That is, within the body, there is a soul which does not change. And this invisible, which is unchanging, can be perceived, but it requires intelligence to perceive. Just as nobody can see gravity, but from the effects of objects falling, the principle of gravity is a reasonable inference. So similarly, the idea of an unchanging spiritual is an inference from the material observations. So basically, when we try to, some of you mentioned that we practice spirituality, we want to find some meaning in our life, we want to find what is enduring. So life is about dualities. Kabhi khushi, kabhi gum. So there is always duality, happiness and distress. Now, one of the things that we find happening in today's world is that a lot of people overreact. When there is happiness, we go higher. When there is distress, we go way down. And in this way, we end up being quite temperamental, quite moody. We may see this especially among teenagers. But it is something which is there in everyone. Say, for example, two people, somebody gets a new job, and one day they say, I love this job, this is the best job in the world. And next day, maybe their boss gives them some feedback. And they say, what a terrible job, why did I take this job? I hate this job. So, we have these dualities going on. Or two people come together and they say, I love you, I can't live without you. And next day, some quarrel happens, some misunderstanding happens. No, I hate you, I can't live with you. And in this way, it is profited up and down, up and down. So the world is like an ocean, Bhavasagar. It is an ocean. In the ocean, there will be ups and downs. But if we are in this ocean, if we are here, as the waves will come, they will toss us up and down. However, if we can find an anchor that is large enough, and we can hold on to that anchor, then that anchor will ensure that we don't get tossed up and down, that we stay steady. And spirituality offers us that anchor. So the essence of spirituality, as described in the Bhagavad Gita, is that there is a large reality, and we are all parts of that reality. So each one of us is a part. Mamaivangsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana. That God is not just some being who exists somewhere far away up there in the sky. God is actually all-pervading. Of course, He exists far away, but He's within us, He's without us, He's everywhere. And we are parts of that higher reality. And to the extent the part is in harmony with the whole, to that extent the part will be having meaning to its life. The part will be joyful. The part will be having an enriched existence. So, there is an ultimate reality, and that is the divine, and we are parts. In fact, we are all parts of something bigger. We are parts of family, we are parts of the community, we are parts of a country. So, all these wholes, as we take them bigger and bigger and bigger, is there an ultimate whole that contains all the other wholes? That ultimate whole is said to be God. That is the ultimate reality. And while there are ways in which the existence of God can be perceived through science, when as science is advancing, we are finding that there is so much order and intricacy in the organization of things that it just very strongly points to the existence of some organizing principle. Imagine if somebody were playing a game of dice, and what was stake in that game of dice was the person's life. If it falls 6, we live. If it falls anything else, we die. And once we toss it, it falls 6. Wow, we're lucky. Second time they play, again it falls 6. Hey, you're living a charmed existence. 5 times you toss it, each time it falls 6. Does the dice only have 6 on all sides? What's going on? If 50 times you toss the dice and each time it falls 6, that suggests that there is something special going on. So if we look at the universe around us, there are so many dice tosses. Any of it went slightly wrong, slightly different, we would not exist. If we look at the way the earth is positioned, if the earth were a little closer to the sun, it will be too hot for us to exist. The earth were a little further away, it will be too cold for us to exist. If we consider the earth moves on its axis, if the earth were moving a little faster, if a day instead of 24 hours, it was 16 hours, and the rotation of the earth would be so fast that it would set off storms and tornadoes. And again, life would not be possible. If the earth's axis had not been tilted slightly, then there would not have been the alteration of seasons. And without the alteration of seasons, there would not be growth of vegetation. So, the life as we know it would not exist. If the percentage of oxygen in the atmosphere had been a little more or a little less, things would have been far more complicated. That is one of the fears associated with climate change. It is like this, scientists have found out almost 127 principles. Each of these things have to be exactly what they are. If even a slight variation in any of these, life would not have been possible. So many dices that have been thrown, each of them have fallen in such a way that the broader whole that it belonged to, that broader whole is just suited for our existence. So, it is, as an intelligence means to see beyond what glitters to what matters. So, if we look at the universe properly, we will see that there is some organizing principle. And that organizing principle, how do we align with it? That's the last part I talk. What was the acronym I was going to discuss? Do you remember? Yes, a sip of wisdom. So, last part is P. So, P is purification. Now, purification is not just some religious ritual where put some water or put some water to purify themselves or chant some mantras, and those will be part of it. But the essence of purification is that it is a process by which what we feel matters. It aligns with what really matters. What we feel matters aligns with what really matters. When we all function in our lives, we function with the idea of something matters. So now if you consider the mismatch between these two, mismatch between what we feel matters and what actually matters, that is a cause of great distress. One of my friends is from Russia, and he was telling me that when he was growing up, there were ads about awareness about alcohol addiction. The main alcohol that is in Russia is vodka. So there was this ad where a family is watching TV and the news comes and the price of vodka has risen. And then the kid is still fearfully, timidly asking his father, who is drinking a bottle of vodka. He says, "Dad, will you drink less?" And the father says, "No, you will eat less." So, such a tragic distortion of values. Now we may feel appalled and disgusted to hear this. We may do it the same thing. We may value money so much that we neglect our relationships. Many people, they lose their health to gain wealth. And then after 40, 45, 50, they lose their wealth to gain back their health. And then in the end, we lose both our health and our wealth. So, often we are driven by an idea of what matters in our life. Somebody may think that the biggest purpose of my life is to get a huge mansion like home. Okay. But in that time, we neglect our relationship, we neglect our health, we neglect our inner growth, our spiritual growth. We may get that big house, but that big house will only provide us a lot of space in which to be lonely and unhappy. So, what matters? And what we feel matters. There is a mismatch between them. And purification is what helps us to bring in alignment. Greed or be it anger. There are these inner impurities which I talked about. Greed, anger, lust, jealousy. All of them, what they do is, they create a mismatch between what matters and what we feel matters. Now somebody who is jealous, they are very good at counting blessings of others. Oh, this person got this and this person got that and this person got that. And oh, I don't have this. And they become unhappy. Actually, our happiness depends on what we have and what we do with what we have. It doesn't depend on what others have. So basically, purification is the process by which what we feel matters becomes increasingly aligned with what matters. And this brings me, I said spirituality has two parts, philosophy and practice. So philosophy is understood through intelligence, where we see beyond what glitters to what matters. And practice is what the various practices are what enable us to become purified, to align what we think matters with what really matters. So basically, what the spiritual vision describes to us is that each one of us, as I said, we are parts of God. And because we are parts of God, what it means is we have parts in God's plan. Every one of us is a precious part of the divine, and every one of us has an invaluable part in the divine plan, by which each one of us can do good for ourselves and for the world. So the practice in spirituality is a practice which centers on two things. There is connection internally, the divine, and there is contribution externally through the move of service. So when we establish inner connection and the outer contribution, we will find that our satisfaction will increase substantially. So I will talk about one image which I conclude this session. That we all function in the world, and when we function in the world, quite often we do certain things and we expect certain things from the world. By the world, we mean people. We may study a lot and we expect that I should come top in my class. We may work in our professional field and we expect that I'll become famous, I'll be recognized as the best employee, the best executive, or the best business person. So we expect things to happen particularly in the world. We may offer love to someone and we expect that person to reciprocate. But unfortunately, the world doesn't always work like that. We will, if our vision is limited only to this much, I and the world, then what we have will never be. What somebody else has will that's what we'll be longing for more and more. Like say suppose some colleague, some friend of ours loses their job. And it's easy to feel empathic for them. Things will be alright. But if they get a job better than our job, then everybody is happy, but not happier than me. There is always this insecurity, this sense of the comparing mentality keeps us constantly insecure and unhappy. So if our vision is focused only on the world, then there is going to be insecurity and eventually a sense of inferiority. And this plagues everyone in today's world. The Gita expands our vision. It says that we are here in this world, but above us is God. And what we have is a gift to us. It's a gift given to us by God. Each one of us may have some talents, some interests, some abilities, and each of these is a gift to us given by God. And what we do with what we have is our gift to God. What we do with what we have, that is our gift to God. In this way, each one of us is given a gift so that we can give a gift to the world and help contribute in the world. So Bhakti is about establishing this inner connection where we understand that we are all parts of the divine. That our connection with God is not dependent on anything external. Whether how much fame I have, how much wealth I have, how good are my looks, they don't matter. Each one of us has intrinsic self-worth. Because each one of us is a beloved part of the divine. Many of you have children. One of the greatest gifts that any parent can give to a child is to help them realize that they have intrinsic self-worth. The world will define our self-worth only in extrinsic terms. But that propels us on the path of insecurity and inferiority. So each one of us, when we adopt spiritual practices, say we were doing some kirtan over here, we chanted the Hare Krishna mantra. So this is not just a religious ritual, it's a way by which we connect with the divine. We chant this mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. It is basically a reminder to ourselves that we are parts of a higher reality. Oh part, stay in our harmony with the whole. Oh part, return to harmony with the whole. And that is why such mantra chanting, such prayers, they bring, if we do diligently, a peace of mind that no amount of wealth can provide. Because this brings us a inner connection. And then, once we have established that inner connection, then each one of us can make an outer contribution. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna, Ma Anusmara Nityacha. He says, you remember me, remember that you are part of me, remember that you have a plan in my vision for the world. So stay internally connected, stay secure. And then, your particular role in society is that you are a marching guard in a society. So you use your archery skills for fighting. So each one of us, some of you may be professionals, doctors, engineers, professors, homemakers. We all have different roles. But all these roles can be done in a mood of seva, in a mood of service. And when we do this, we will find that the greater our inner connection, the greater our outer contribution. We'll find that a sublime satisfaction will start coming in our life. A satisfaction that no amount of material possession or material position can provide. And that is the ultimate blessing of spirituality. The Bhagavad Gita concludes with an image of Arjuna having raised his bow in readiness to fight. So what happens is, at the start of the Gita, Arjuna is dejected. He's confused, he's dejected. He's put aside his bow. I can't fight. But that same Arjuna, at the end of the Gita, is confident, is energized. He has picked up his bow. So Arjuna's bow represents our determination. Life's struggles and challenges can dishearten even the best of us. We start thinking, is it really worth it? I'm working so hard, people don't appreciate what I'm doing. The world is not recognizing me. Is it really worth it? But when we get this spiritual vision of life, we understand that everything that we do matters. That life, when we live it in a mood of connection and contribution, is something that really matters. Every one of our existence, every one of us, our endeavors matter. And it is that vision that fills our life with meaning and purpose and grants us the ultimate fulfillment. So, to summarize what I discussed today, we discussed about the relationship between broadly science and spirituality, or broadly a scientific approach to spirituality. So I talked about a sip of wisdom. The first point was spirituality. So many of you mentioned various aspects of spirituality, and I discussed that spirituality is the study of what matters. That there is the study of matter in science has excelled, but there is the study of what matters, what is really important in life. And as a part of the study, there are two aspects. Philosophy offers us a postulation of reality. What are the various components of reality and what matters within? And practice is what enables us. Within practice, there is religion, but practice is what enables us to align ourselves, to verify the philosophy aspect. So philosophy in science is like theory, an experiment that is similar to the practice. And then in the second point, I talk about SIP, intelligence. So this intelligence is associated with the philosophy aspect. So intelligence means we see beyond what glitters to what matters. That there is more to reality than what we perceive. Science has also told us that beyond visible phenomena, there are invisible principles. And it is to the extent we understand those invisible principles, to that extent we can tap great power. Just observing apples fall does not give any power. But understanding the invisible principle of gravity gives us great power. So similarly, what the Gita tells us is that there is duality in this world. And just being buffeted, tossed up and down with a duality will keep us unsteady. But if we can connect with an anchor, then which is far bigger than that duality, then that anchor will bring us steadiness. So how do we connect with that anchor? The Gita explains that there is a larger reality and we are parts. Each one of us is parts of larger reality. So that there is a larger organized reality. I talk about the point of the game of dice. That there are more than 100 things which are exactly right for our existence. So the larger reality that we are part of is not just an arbitrary existence. There is an organized intelligence behind it. The last part I talked about was P was purification. So this was associated with the practice by which what happens is that what we feel matters becomes more and more aligned with what actually matters, what really matters. Most of the distress in life, like addiction, is an example where the addict thinks that what matters is alcohol, even at the cost of relationships, health, finances, life. Anger is control right now matters more than a steady relationship. But what we feel matters and what really matters. But to extent that we get aligned, we find that we will become steadier and happier in our lives. So as long as our vision is just I am here and the world is here, and I will work and I will get recognition from the world. And this will always keep us with a feeling of insecurity. But if you understand that we are parts of a higher reality, we have been given gifts and we are meant to give gifts, then this inner connection and the outer contribution, these are the dual aspects of spirituality. Through personal spiritual practices like mantra chanting, we establish our inner connection. And through adopting a mood of service in everything that we do in our life, we make outer contribution. In this way, we will find that our life will become filled with a sublime meaning, with a divine purpose, and with the ultimate fulfillment. Thank you very much. Praise God.
Dear presence, did you like the session? Now it will be followed by question and answer. We'll ask questions to our people. There are wireless available. We already got a question. And there were some written questions as well. Can we have the questions, please?
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhu, for your wonderful presentation. This evening is really very fruitful to me. The way you define and explain spirituality, as well as the seed, the total meaning of spirituality, intelligence, and purifications. That's really meaningful to me. And I do believe this all of us here realized the intensity of the impact of spirituality. And really, the way you explain is a very thought-provoking lecture, no doubt. And it helped us to realize the way we should understand the God, the way we meet the God, the impact of God and role of God in our life. But you know this with the general people, the general people are getting very confused sometimes. You know this, the way you say the spirituality, the philosophy and practice. And we are nowadays in the era of globalization and mass media, we are encountered by a lot of philosophies. And these philosophies misguiding us or guiding us in a different way. The way you say what really matters in life, that means that brings happiness in our life. So different philosophies are saying what really matters to bring happiness in your life. So if we are living in the era of globalizations, when we are facing lots of philosophies, some philosophies say happiness lies in sacrifice. Some philosophies say happiness lies in conjunctions. When we see the other peoples are growing, developing, like in developing world, the governments are focusing on work hard to grow in terms of material science. If you work hard, if you gain money, you will bring happiness for you and your family. On the other hand, when we make the alignment with what we feel matters and we really feel matters, that's if we follow a particular religious philosophy, for example, Bhagavad Gita, the way it's explained us to live our life, that says what really matters. But when we are guided by the economics, society, the way our society leading us, we compare with ourselves. Like Americans have that, we must have that. Otherwise, we cannot get that happiness. We love to go to USA for making money to send it back to country to make the people happy in our society. So under such circumstances, I'm really asking you, like the way you started with the philosophy, psychology, and the science of explaining the
Yes.
spirituality and the life.
Let me summarize the question.
Yeah.
So you want to complete it?
No, I just
got your question.
Yeah, just continue please with that.
Yeah.
I'm also confused with that. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So broadly, I got 3 points in the question. First is that there are so many different, can have a seat, please. There are so many different philosophies in the world, and especially in the Western world, we see there is so much progress, and they're not necessarily spiritual; they're also material progress. And we also feel that when there's a material progress, then without that we cannot be happy. So how does a person find their way through all this confusion? One thing about Bhagavad Gita is that the Bhagavad Gita is in no way against material progress. It is against material progress becoming the sole definition of progress. That we are, when we are spiritual beings, we are also in physical bodies. And physical bodies need a certain level of requirements and conveniences for function. And there's absolutely nothing wrong in requirement. The Gita says, Yukta that our body needs to be literally taken care of appropriately, adequately. So, if we consider progress definitely within that, material progress has a part to it. When Arjuna went to his Gurukul, he studied archery. And by that study, he became better and better in archery. So he progressed materially in terms of the archery expertise. So the material world works according to certain principles. So if we look at the Western world, last 10 years I spent almost more than half of the year in the Western world, speaking and talking and sharing spirituality over there. And two things. First I noticed is that the level of material thought and organization that is there in the Western world is far, far more than what in the Eastern, say the Indian subcontinent, which is where I am to go. So, in general, we humans, wherever we invest our energy, there we will progress. So, humanity, especially in the Western world, has invested its energy in the material domain and has progressed phenomenally. And that, rather than denying or downplaying or deriding that, we just acknowledge that humans have the capacity to make a change. So, material, when energy is invested in the material domain, we progress in the material domain. At the same time, the second thing that has struck me is there are so many mental health problems. And in fact, to the extent Indians or Asians, they go to the West and they become prosperous, to that extent their mental health problems also increase. The same people, Asians or in India, whether it's Indians, Chinese, Bangladeshi, whoever, they, as long as they're here, they do not seem to have that many mental health problems, but they go there and it becomes more. So the problem is that material progress does not lead to all-round progress. And that is why the Western world is more and more becoming open to Eastern spirituality. There's a book written by Goldberg called The American Veda. So I met him also when I was in America, and he talked about how into the heartland of America, Eastern spiritual practices, Indian spiritual practices, be they yoga, be they mantra chanting, be they, now kirtan is like a music category in itself, and people pay a fortune to attend musical concerts. So why is all this spirituality explored? Yoga is so huge in the Western world. Almost 1 in every 4th person in the West has done some course in yoga. How much they practice is secondary, but almost 1 in 10 or 1 in 15 people who practice something else. So why? Because again, the point is, material progress alone does not lead to happiness. So we can go to both extremes. Material progress is everything. That's the Western conception. And that is clearly false. But then the other side you can go and say material progress is nothing. Now this is a distortion of spiritual teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. What the Gita says is that if we want human progress, so in human progress, material progress can be one aspect of it. But along with that, we humans allow the physical side, we have a mental side, then we have a spiritual side. So all three need to progress. If all three are progressing, then that's when our progress will be holistic and sustainable. So the Gita offers us a holistic world. That's why I say spirituality, I didn't say spirituality as a study of the spiritual. It is the study of what matters. So material progress matters, physical conveniences and comforts matter, but our inner state of mind matters, and our spiritual well-being matters. So a philosophy, there can be many philosophies in the world, but a philosophy that integrates various aspects of reality and places them in a hierarchy and harmony, that's what I have found in the Bhagavad Gita. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, we have some questions later here. Dear audience, if you want to share your questions, there are chips available with our rules, our volunteers. Please collect from the rules. Guruji, may I read the question to you?
Yes, please.
Based on the incarnation, as far as we know, the concept about rebirth is discussed only in Hindu religion. why other religions did not discuss about rebirth, reincarnation. Please discuss briefly about reincarnation, which is confusing to many of us. Confusing to many of us.
Okay. So firstly, I'm not sure that the reincarnation is discussed only in Hinduism. It is generally discussed in Buddhism, it's discussed in Jainism, and even in Christianity, there are clearly references to that. When a baby is born blind, when a child is born blind, Jesus asks that, he asks as follows, why was this child born blind? Is it because of the parents' misdeeds or the baby's misdeeds? Now, unless there is some understanding the baby existed before, what misdeed could the baby have done? Did the baby just fold its legs wrong inside the womb and that's why it was born blind? That's absurd. So, there are references. Now, the concept of reincarnation is explained elaborately in the Vedic tradition, because the Vedic tradition centers on sages who have dedicated their life to spiritual growth. With all due respects, the Bible, if you look at the Old Testament, is basically the story of the chosen people, the followers from Egypt who later became Jews, and their adventures in the prophet. There is no very serious philosophical discussion about the nature of reality. It is a book of miraculous interventions of God in His chosen people's lives. And in the New Testament, the Bible is again basically a book about primarily the Gospels, which are Jesus' life story, and in the epistles of Paul, which are basically his instructions to how you can live a life faithful to Jesus. Jesus teaches. So there is not much serious philosophical discussion. So there are Christian philosophers who have said, Alistair MacGregor is one, who said that the idea of reincarnation is completely compatible with Christianity. I have written a book called Demystifying Reincarnation, where I talk about how reincarnation has acceptance in all the major traditions of the world, across history and geography. Now basically what is the idea of reincarnation? It is that, say, we are spiritual beings. So inside us, this is the body, and within that is the soul. So at death, basically the body falls. But then the soul comes out. And then the soul goes through a journey and then it enters into a new body. So the soul entering into a new body is called reincarnation. To come incarnate, to come in flesh, to come again in flesh is reincarnation. Now, if the soul does not get a body soon, for whatever reason, then the soul exists in a disembodied state. And that is what is called as a ghost. But that's a different subject. Now, there are many cases of children who remember their past lives. Dr. Ian Stevenson is a pioneer in the study of this, and there are John Tucker and many others who studied after that. So, they have noted that two people who were at completely different places at different times, the second person remembers specific details of the person's previous life. So, that is in reincarnation studies or past life memory studies, they have found 4 levels of evidences. First is recollections. That a child recollects specific details in the reincarnation. I talk about how there's a case of one boy, Titu Sharma. He is living in Lucknow and he says, my name is Suresh Verma and I live in Kanpur. And I own an electrical shop. And then when he goes there, then the next thing is recognitions. When Titu is small, this 5-year-old boy is taken by his parents to Kanpur and he's never been there before, but he tells the talker, where should we go? And when he goes there, there is actually a studio by the name Verma Electrical Studio. And there is a woman who is and he says, she is my wife. Now she is much older than him. But he recognizes her by name. And then her children The children are older than this boy, but he goes to them and fondles their hair, as if like a father fondling the hair of children, ruffling the hair. And then, not only recognitions, there are behaviors. Behaviors means the person behaves not like the person in this life, but like the person in the previous life. There are many cases of people behaving in completely different from their birth family and behaving as if from their previous family. This could be in terms of food preferences, this could be in terms of behavior, specific likes and dislikes, and then most strongly there are birthmarks. So, Suresh Sharma had been killed point blank in an attack. So, a bullet had entered into his head from one side of a temple and come out from the other side. So, Titu had birthmarks exactly in the same place in his body where the bullet marks had entered and departed. So, police investigation had been done because Suresh Sharma had been murdered. And the post-mortem reports of Suresh Sharma, they compared where exactly was the entry wound, the exit wound. They found it exactly at the same locations, but Titu had birthmarks. So, these are all 4 converging lines of evidence which point to the reality of reincarnation.
We have got so many questions. The next question is how this concept of science and spirituality help the new generations of Sanatani, especially our Sanatani girls, are converting at an alarming rate.
Sorry.
Converting to other religion at an alarming rate.
I didn't get the last question.
How this concept of science and spirituality help the new generations of Sanatani, especially our Sanatani girls, as they are converting at an alarming rate.
Converting to what?
To other religion.
Well, from a practical perspective, there is a religious marketplace in the world. And whoever markets their religion better, people will be attracted to that. So what happened in the broad Vedic tradition is that when there were kings who were ruling, the kings were patrons for the spiritual teachers, for the religious priests. So now the priestly infrastructure is still there in terms of your temples and priests, but the educational infrastructure in terms of sharing spiritual wisdom, sharing the philosophy has been lost. So if there is no one sharing the spiritual wisdom of our tradition, people will be attracted to wisdom of other traditions. And worse still, if our tradition is presented simply as a set of rules which don't make sense, then people will adopt something else which seems to make more sense or seems to offer some social advantages. So it is, if you just take a scientific approach to this, scientific means we look at the practical factors at all. I'd say that things are changing. That what you're saying is true, but there are lots of people, especially when I go to America and UK, I find a lot of young people are also turning towards spirituality. And especially Indian spirituality. At their homes, their parents will tell them to chant some mantra, they will not chant. But when they go to college, and in the college there's a mantra meditation club. And there they learn about mantra chanting and they feel, hey, this is cool, I want to do this. So basically we need more and more educational initiatives.
If I don't believe in God, can I be a spiritual person? According to the philosophy of SIP, if I don't believe in God, can I be a spiritual
philosophy
person? According to the philosophy you provided, SIP.
SIP, okay. So now, when people say I don't believe in God, what they have the idea is that everyone has a particular conception of God. And we are reacting to that conception of God. I was in America and one boy told me, I don't believe in God. I was giving a college talk. And they said, okay, what is the conception of God you don't believe in? He said, no, I don't believe in any God. Okay, tell me what is the conception? He said, I don't believe in a God who sends you to hell, who sends people to hell just because they don't believe in Him. So I said, even I don't believe in such a God. The Gita doesn't say such a conception of God. The Gita says hell is for wrongdoers, not non-believers. People can believe what they want. God gives us freedom to believe. But if we act in harmful and destructive ways, then that is what we are held accountable for. So basically, many people who say I don't believe in God, if you just explore what is their conception of God that they are rejecting, then it is a conception of God which is quite distinct from the conception of the divine being in the Bhagavad Gita. So, to be spiritual means to be seeking something beyond the material, to at least be valuing it substantially. And when you value something beyond the material, then gradually you become more open to exploring what that non-material thing is. And then we may compare our conception of God with what is taught in the tradition, what is taught in scriptures. We can come to greater understanding. So I would say that the key characteristic of the spiritual is giving due importance to something beyond the material.
How can we remain mentally undisturbed by provoking situations?
To remain undisturbed in provoking situations, the more things change, the more we need to hold on to the things that don't change. So first of all, we need to have something that does not change. And then we need to be able to hold on to that thing. So for example, somebody whom we care for, that person is behaving in a very disturbing way. Say we give a lot of importance to money. Our self-worth is equal to our net worth. And then a stock market crashes, then we will be disturbed. So the key to not being disturbed is to be able to connect with the things that don't change. So spiritual practices like mantra chanting, like praying, these connect us to the divine reality who does not change. So basically I give the example of anchor. We are all in this ocean, but the divine earlier is depicted as the anchor. But actually divine is the anchor who extends throughout the ocean. And wherever we are, from there, we can just catch hold of the anchor. And to the extent we hold on to the anchor, to that extent we will develop samatva, we will become steady amidst duality.
Thanks for your nice lecture. To be spiritual, there are so many rules and regulations to maintain. How can we apply them in today's busy life?
See, the point of spirituality is not rules. The point of spirituality is a relationship. And relationship is developed by focusing on the personal connection. When we want to relate with a particular person, naturally we try to understand what their likes are, what their dislikes are, and we'll align ourselves accordingly. So spirituality is about coming to harmony with ultimate reality. So the rules, if you are only focusing on the rules, then they can seem restrictive. But all rules have a purpose. Like if you consider cricket as a sports, cricket has so many rules. The bowler has to bowl, but should not go beyond this line. The batsman has to bat, but the batsman has to hit the ball only when it is in this domain. After the batsman has hit the ball, and the ball has gone into the sky, and the fielder is coming to catch the ball. At that time, the bowler cannot go and hit the ball. Or the bowler cannot go and hit the fielder. You cannot do that. There are rules. But what happens is, within those rules, the bowler, the batsman, the fielder, they can all develop their skills. And they can all excel. So, rules are not ends in themselves. Rules are for developing excellence and playing the sport. Similarly, in spirituality, the rules are meant for us to develop the relationship, to come in greater harmony. As I said, to appreciate our gifts through inner connection and then to contribute in mode of service using those gifts.
This world is so competitive nowadays.
It's so
competitive.
complicated.
Competitive.
Competitive, yeah.
Okay. Obviously, our Sanatani culture and belief are much enriched and wholesome than any other religious belief. But our spiritual thoughts are not being able to combat the aggressive attitude of other religion, and our youths are easily being converted. Is it not our spiritual and modest ideology lagging us behind? Is it not our spiritual and modest ideology lagging us behind?
Modest or moral?
Modest.
Modest.
Ideology.
Well, in answer, conversion is a challenge, but we have to consider what is the cause of it. See, no other tradition in the world has been as attacked, both geopolitically and intellectually, as has been the Vedic tradition. In the Indian subcontinent, the Vedic tradition was there for a long time, but the Indian subcontinent is, you could say, geopolitically extremely vulnerable. Like I was in America for 3 months. America is uniquely geopolitically blessed in the history of the world. That means no enemies. Canada is not a hostile country. Mexico is not a very powerful country. It's surrounded by oceans, protected. The Indian subcontinent is vulnerable from above. Although there are Himalayas, still there are passages to the Himalayas people can attack. And from below also there are other land masses people can come by ships. So no other tradition has been as attacked as the Indian tradition. And the fact that it has survived in spite of that itself is remarkable. And no other tradition from classical or prehistorical times. If you go to Egypt today, there's nothing of the pharaohs and Egyptian civilization there. If you go to Greece, there's nothing of the Greek civilization. Even modern China is very, very different from ancient China. There's hardly anything of Chinese civilization. So the Indian civilization has remarkable resilience. And that comes from its intrinsic spiritual strength. So we need to tap that strength and share that. So Swami Prabhupada, this picture we have over here, he was 70 years old when he decided that I will share this spiritual wisdom with the world. At the age of 70, he left India and single-handedly he went to America with just 40 rupees. And within 10 years, just by his vigor to share spiritual wisdom and by his faith in the value of what he was sharing, he built out 108 temples, he wrote over 70 books, he went on a global tour circumnavigating the world 14 times. He inspired millions of people. So there is a lot of spiritual potencies available right now. So rather than worrying too much about what other religions are doing and how they are evolving, we need to focus more on understanding what is the actual teaching of our tradition and aligning our life according to it. The more we do that, the more people will be attracted.
We have some questions there?
Oh, I'm basically a pediatrician, which is a physician pertaining to the child care. So my conflict is, while I teach my students about the early childhood development, that means we believe that children are born with their genetic potential as dictated by the nature. Again, that will be translated into action with the environment he is being nurtured. So that is called as a nature-nurture interaction. So in that case, if I am born in a prostitution, I would not have been a doctor. It is assumed that. So what is the problem and how do you really correlate this thing, whether I was born earlier, had a lot of mistakes to come to this world as an individual from prostitution. And that is one.
So there is the prostitution?
Yeah, I mean that
Okay, then
it is an environment.
born in that kind of environment.
Just to say,
I didn't hear the word clearly. Go ahead.
actually, sorry.
Go ahead, please. Yeah.
Next is, when I was studying about the presence of soul and the cosmology, the modern physics.
Okay, is this a separate question?
Yeah.
Okay, let me complete one question first. Okay, and I'll go to second one. You can set up this. Yes. So basically, the nature nurture is a very important subject, and it is true that people are shaped by both. Now, what you're saying is true, that if somebody is born in a bad neighborhood, it's very likely that their life is going to go on a dark pathway. But it is not always like that. Some of the most inspiring stories in human history are of people who were born in terrible circumstances and those who rose above those adversities. So, while nurture does play a significant role, nurture alone is not necessarily destiny. Nurture alone does not determine our future. It definitely determines our future, but not alone. Similarly, nature alone, it does not determine our future. We all have a particular nature, but we can discipline our nature. Some kid might be born with a very aggressive nature, short-tempered, fighting, aggressive. But the child hangs out or is brought up by people who are moderately behaved, who are restrained, that will rub off. Maybe not entire character change, nature can be, I said it can be disciplined. It cannot be completely changed, but it can be disciplined for strength. And so people who are aggressive, if they also have a certain level of discipline, then that aggression can help them become protectors instead of just attackers and assaulters. So now what the Gita says is that each one of us has some karmic baggage that we carry from our previous life. So this is birth and this is death. Now we have existed before this. We had a death and we had a birth. And we'll have another birth and then another death. So like this, there is multi-life progression. And what we talk about the genetic potential, that in one sense from our previous lives, we get a certain level of daiva or destiny. The same idea is talked about in different traditions by different names. It's called as Kishmet in the Arabic tradition, Kismet. It's called as Shibboleth or something like that in Japanese, many things are there. So now what the Vedic tradition says is that a major installation of destiny, of past karma, comes to us at birth. That birth means that, as I said, kind of genes that we have, the kind of complexion that we have, the kind of IQ level that we have. Now IQ level can definitely be improved, but it's very difficult for somebody, if they have a starting level of 70 to go to 140. From 120 somebody can go to 140, 150, something like that. So there's a starting point. And then similarly, by our karma, by the destiny that is basically resulting from our karma from previous lives, there are certain events in our life that are fixed. So the kind of environment in which we grow up, that to some extent is fixed. So that's where the nurture aspect comes. But within that environment, whom do we focus on? So beyond both of nature and nurture, there is free will. Now destiny may determine the complexion of our face. Some people may have dark complexion, some people may have fair complexion, some people may have in between, whatever. Somebody may have blonde hair, somebody may have black hair. So destiny determines our complexion, but we determine the expression on our face. And even a face which does not have a very attractive complexion, if the person is cheerful, they look attractive. Now destiny may determine again the broad kind of people in which we grow up. But within that community, whom do we focus on? Whom do we spend more time with? That's up to us. Somebody may have very loving parents, but they may have a bitter cousin or a bitter uncle, and they spend more time with that person, or they take more from that person and they become bitter. Or somebody may have very neglectful parents, but they may have a caring grandmother, and they may take more from their grandmother. So within nurture, it is that there are different people who are nurturing in different ways, and the individual has free will whom they focus on. And conversely, even the caregivers, those who are giving nurture also, they also have free will. And sometimes the parents just complain about life, my life is so unfortunate, this person did this to me, and that person did that to me, and that person did that to me. That influence will not change. When the parents make the best of what they have, children will get that. So basically, we all have, so the nature and the nurture situations of that, both of them are determined by our destiny, which is determined by our past karma, which is determined by our use of free will. And we also have free will right now. The margin of free will may be small or big depending on the situation, but we always have some free will. And to the extent we use it well, we will find that we can create a brighter future for ourselves. And our free will, it can be boosted, it can be strengthened by divine will. So if we practice bhakti, if we connect with God, in whatever free will we have, it becomes much stronger. And that's how we can transcend or rise above our situations.
Thank you for the explanation, though I feel it is completely based on faith rather than scientifically proven mechanism. Anyway,
Let me address this one. See, there is faith required even in science. Because science, you can say it operates based on evidence. But we have not studied all of humanity. We study a particular sample, and based on that, we project, we infer, we induct, we use the method of induction. So, whether our future induction will be true or not, that is the article of faith. So, faith is required even in science. When we took the vaccines, some testing was done, but that does not mean that in the future those vaccines will not have some other counterproductive effects. So, faith is required even in science. Now, is faith required in spirituality? Of course. But it is not completely faith. It is faith coupled with, in science you may have physical evidence in terms of case studies. In spirituality, there is reason and logic. So basically, we notice that there are different starting points for people. Now, why are there different starting points? We could basically have three explanations. One is that this life is a game of chance, and some people are lucky and some people are unlucky. Well, okay, that is a possibility, but that is not the way we function within this life. No parent tells their children, whether you wash your teeth or you don't wash your teeth, still your teeth are going to get destroyed. No parent teaches their children that whether you make your bed or don't make your bed, life is going to save. No, we operate based on an implicit acceptance of cause and effect. So, if during life we operate based on cause and effect, then why? At the start of life, there should be no cause effect, there should be only chance, blind chance. So basically, the starting conditions of life, we can explain them in one way is chance. But that is inconsistent with how we function in life. Now the other explanation could be divine will, or more precisely, divine caprice. God's arbitrary will. God has decided this person should be like this person should be like that. But then, why does God discriminate like this? And if God discriminates arbitrarily by getting some children born in wealthy families and some in poor families, then why should we have such a worship? worship a discriminatory God? How can we love and trust a being who is so discriminatory? So this basically alienates us from God. And in fact, when the choice is between chance and arbitrary divine will, many thoughtful people will choose chance and become atheistic. But that is one of the main that is one of the main reasons why atheism is growing in the Western world. Because as people become more thoughtful, the dogmas of the kind of religion which says that everything is determined by God's arbitrary will, that is utterly alienating. But what the Vedic tradition offers us is that there is karma and progression. So our starting point is determined by the place where we left in the previous life. It's like if a cricket match is going on and say one team starts right in the beginning with a score of 200. Say, why is this team starting at 200? One explanation could be that the scoreboard operates chaotically. And if by chance this team got a 200 score. That's not the way we function. During the innings, only when a batsman scores, then the scoreboard goes. So at the starting it's arbitrary. The second could be that the scorekeeper is biased. The scorekeeper arbitrarily decides that this should be starting score. The third and most reasonable explanation is that it is not the first innings. The team which seems to have a starting score of 200 has scored more in the previous innings. So basically, when we look at the world as it exists, the idea of a previous life and continuation from the previous life is the most reasonable explanation for it. Now, does it involve faith? Of course. But is it based only on faith? Certainly not. It is a logical and the most logical explanation of what would otherwise be completely unexplained. Okay?
My question is, actually we came from this told by Stephen Hawking and others, that we came from one infinite power in a very small center of then we have been to the existence, and it is a sort of expansion. That is Big Bang theory. So if you try to correlate in that way, probably the philosophy of evolution goes better than the physiology of belief. So you will have to rethink on the basis, because the scientists are not in a point to admit the fact of the faith, because they are the believer that can be experimented, intervened, and come with an evidence to be repeated and reproduced. So we have to be scientific, number one.
Yes, let me address this point. Thank you. So this is a good question, really. So science has three different methods for determining theories. One is deductive, the second is inductive, and third is abductive. So deductive means, for example, it's math. So okay, 3 plus 9 is 12. It's deduced based on the very principles of mathematics. Now very little in the physical world can be actually deduced, because real life, its messy complexity is not just about numbers. So most of science operates based on inductive logic or inductive reasoning, where we do a certain number of experiments, and based on that we infer this is the law operating over here. So when Newton saw an apple falling, he postulated the idea of gravity, and based on that he did repeated experiments. So others did repeated experiments. Does a stone fall? Does it fall not just in London but in Paris also, in other parts of the world? So there's repeated experiments. And this is where science has had the most success, even phenomenal success. The sound system, the internet, air transportation. However, when it comes to origins, origin of the universe, origin of life, origin of species, science cannot use the inductive method. The origin of the universe is a one-time event. There is no possibility for doing repeated experiments to evaluate how things happen. Origin of species, origin of life, these are all one-time events that have happened. Now we can speculate and guess about what kind of conditions were there and how those things may have happened at that time. But we really don't know exactly what kind of conditions were there. And we don't really know when those conditions interact at that scale what would happen. So my point is, adaptive reasoning is highly tentative. So what happens? This is a sometimes an honest mistake and sometimes a dishonest mistake. Honest mistake is that the credit that is due to science because of its success through theories made using inductive reasoning, that same credit is applied to theories deduced using abductive reasoning. So Big Bang theory, there is no experiment to replicate that from happening. Even origin of life or origin of species, there is no experiment specifically to replicate that. So theories made using abductive reasoning, they are basically like a mystery novel, somebody deducing how did this murder happen. So you cannot tell the criminal, please come and commit the murder again and we'll catch you in action. So theories of science which are developed using abductive reasoning, they need to be seen with new caution. Like say you are as you said, you are a pediatrician. Now there are medicines which have been well tested and there are experimental medicines. Now sometimes if the child is really sick and there is no medicine available, then you may recommend some experimental medicine treatment. But you have a moral duty and a professional duty to tell the patients or the patient's parents that this is an experimental medicine. It may work, but it involves some unpredictable risks also. And then the patients should be given a willing consent to that kind of experimental medicine. So theories like Big Bang or evolution, they need to come with that kind of disclaimer that the same credibility that comes to theory of gravity or to fluid mechanics and the laws of thermodynamics, that cannot be applied to these theories. So they fall in a different category and they need to be seen with due skepticism. Now having said that, these are talking both whether these theories are true or false. They are talking about how matter formed. They are not talking about how consciousness emerged. There is no satisfactory explanation. The theory of evolution in terms of biological evolution may have some evidence, but a theory of evolution in terms of chemical evolution, how consciousness emerged from matter, that has very, very little evidence. The Science magazine in its 125th anniversary published an article about 125 questions that science doesn't have answers to. The second question over there was, what is the origin of consciousness? The first question was, what is the origin of the universe? So what Dawkins proposes as singularity from which something emerges, that is this theory. That is, but if you consider mainstream scientists, the origin of the universe and origin of consciousness, these are unexplored, these are unanswered questions. And there is a lot more to explore within that. So the spiritual explanations or the explanations of Vedic traditions or other traditions, these are also worth exploring, rather than presuming that certain scientific things are necessarily true, when even mainstream science acknowledges that these are unanswered questions.
Another query is that whether this query, is this soul, it is said in Gita, it is not perceivable, not expressible. So which is not perceived, which is not expressible, how can we really have faith on it? Number one. And I had last question to you.
Let me complete this about. And in the Gita is saying that it is not perceivable.
Yes.
Okay.
Sanskrit is like this. Apal manusya gochara. That means It cannot be expressed, it cannot be perceived, according to Gita.
Okay, now that particular point, now that particular phrase doesn't come in the Gita. It might come in some other verse. The Gita does talk about certain aspects of the soul, achintyoyam, akaryoyam, it talks about things like that. Now, what it means is important. Like I said, that there is something, like science itself says that we go from visible phenomena to invisible principles. So the Gita also says that in the search for identity, in the understanding of who we are, we need to go beyond our visible roles. So you are a doctor, you are probably a father, you are maybe you are a son, not maybe you are a son. We all have different roles. But is there a core to us beyond our roles? That's the question the Gita is exploring. And it says that this core itself cannot be perceived by externals. Now we all have our roles, but no, some people not like to be reduced to their roles. Yeah, I'm a parent, I'm a Bangladeshi citizen, but there is so much more to me than just these roles. So the Vedic Gita says the soul is not perceivable. What it means is, through the externals we identify ourselves with certain roles, but the core of us is beyond these roles. Now, when it says it cannot be perceived, it means that simply by our senses it cannot be perceived. But with our intelligence, Jnana Chakshu, with the eyes of wisdom, Utkramantam Sitam Vapi Punjani Munanvitam Vimudhanam Pashyanti Jnana Chakshusha. With the eyes of wisdom, we can perceive it. So like that, whether it is the principle, now we can talk about gravity can be perceived, but in science, there is the idea of dark matter. Dark matter, or in science there is the idea of parallel universes. Now parallel universes, by their very definition, they cannot be perceived. But then there is some mathematical inference by which their existence has been postulated. And those scientists who are postulating it are not just engaging in free imagination. There is some reason. So the Gita is saying that it cannot be perceived in the sense that with our senses, with what is visible, we can't perceive it. But with intelligence, we can. So, I was in Canada, I spoke at the Toronto University. But there is a research center for dedicated to Dr. Wilder Penfield. He's considered the father of modern neuroscience, especially neurosurgery. So he wrote several books, one of which is The Mystery of the Mind. And then he used an experiment which led him to conclude that consciousness does not have a material or a cerebral origin. So what is the experiment he did? Now we know different parts of the brain are connected to different physical functions. So there's a part of the brain, the parietal lobe or whatever, is connected with the motor nervous system. So he asked the subject to raise his hand. And when the subject raised his hand under neural imaging, they saw that a particular part of the brain got activated. And he asked the subject to lower his hand. And that part of the brain got deactivated. Now, using electrodes, he activated that part of the brain. And then the subject's hand went up. And then he asked the subject, what happened? He said, my hand went up. And he asked the subject more specifically, did you raise your hand? He said, no, I didn't raise my hand. He says, you raised my hand. Then he deactivated that part of that probe, and the hand fell down. He says, did you lower your hand? What happened? He says, my hand fell down. Did you lower your hand? He said, no, I didn't. Now, Dr. Penfield, he repeated this experiment while simultaneously activating other parts of the brain. He wanted to see whether there is any part of the brain when it is activated gives the patient, gives the subject, the sense of agency that I am acting. So when different parts of the brain were activated, the subject remembered some childhood food that they eaten, maybe they played some games, some conversation they had years ago. Many stimuli came, but no part of the brain when activated gave a sense of agency to the subject. So the idea is to explain in analog terms. That is, say, if this is my computer and here there's a printer next to it. Now I can press the print button over here, and then the printer's hand will start moving. Now you can come and you can press the print button, and the print hand will start moving. So in Penfield's experiment, in the second case, it was he, Dr. Penfield, who pressed the print button. Press the print button. The print button is like the center of the brain, which is associated with the motor nervous system, which causes the hand to go up and down. So now his question is, who pressed the print button in the first case? Who is it that is saying that I didn't press it in the second case? So no matter how much he probed the brain, he couldn't find that. So therefore he concluded that the source of consciousness is extracerebral. The mind is like the brain is like a computer, but it is programmed by something outside of itself. So there are not scientific, I would say, proof, but there are scientific pointers toward the idea of consciousness coming from something beyond matter. Okay.
Last question. Will you suggest a society of law or a society of spirituality to be interrelated, to be present for a very conducive society? I feel it is
Law or love? L-A-W?
law
L-A-W. Yes. Okay, good point. See, actually, spirituality recognizes that law is essential. See, one of the things about spirituality is that it says we humans have a higher nature and we have a lower nature. So the higher nature is what needs to be developed. This needs to be developed. But at the same time, the lower nature needs to be disciplined. And traditionally, there are two aspects of society, social management. So the higher nature is developed through Shastra. And the lower nature is disciplined through Shastra. Shastra is wisdom. Shastra is weapons. So now there will be a small and significant minority in whom the higher nature is more prominent. And for them, Shastra, wisdom is vital. And they will themselves realize how acting according to morality, acting according to spirituality is in their best interest. But there are many in whom the lower nature is prominent. And for them, Shastra in terms of wisdom alone will not work. And that's why Shastra is required. So when the Bhagavad describes that the avatar descends to this world, the avatar uses Shastra. The avatar also gives wisdom, Shastra. So wisdom and weapons, both are required, Shastra and Shastra. So spirituality is not just about spiritual, it is also about recognizing the reality of the material. And that means people with lower nature will need law to regulate themselves. However, if society is governed only by laws, then people will keep finding loopholes to get out of the laws. So laws need a purpose, a vision. And that vision is not just order in this world. There's also some higher purpose beyond this world. So Shastra and Shastra both go together. Thank you, very good questions.
Thank you. Dear audience,
Excuse me, please.
before we go to the next question, I have an announcement.
Yeah.
Okay, Hare Krishna. Sorry, we have scheduled time, so we think we will not be able to take all the questions. I have an announcement for all of you. We have 3 books available, written by our Chaitanya Charan, translated into Bengali, available at the front desk. আর্থিক সংকটে কিভাবে সুখে থাকা যায়, আমাদের মন্দিরের প্রয়োজন কেন, why do we need a temple, and energy, শক্তি,
These 3 books are available at the front desk. If you need, you can collect those. And we will move to our next question. We will not be taking much questions. There was a question. We will take the question, but there is also a question. I request all of you to have patience, please. Who we got a question like, do we really need a guru or organization to practice spirituality?
Okay. So, do we need a guru organization? See, guru is a person who is essentially has gone on the spiritual path. In every field, if you are serious, if somebody is in athletics, they want a coach who will help them grow on that path. So, same principle applies in spiritual domain. Now, as far as the organization is concerned, essentially, what is an organization? It is made of individuals. So, the example is given that each one of us, we are like a trickle of water. And say there is a large mountain, and then there is an ocean over there. So now, from the mountain, the water is coming down. Now there will be many obstacles on the way. So now each small trickle of water, maybe it can come all the way down to the ocean. But if many trickles of water come together to form a tributary, the tributaries come together to form a river, then the river has a far greater chance of getting to the ocean. The river will eventually form a bed. By the flow of the river itself will form a bed, and that will make it easier for the water to go toward the ocean. So each individual who wants to practice spirituality is like that trickle of water. And they want to get to the ocean. That is the ultimate spiritual destination. So now, when spiritually minded people come together, at that time, they form an organization. Just like coming together is an organization. But unfortunately, whenever there is an organization, like whenever there is water flowing smoothly, in large quantity, there will be people who will come and form a dam. Now, they are not interested in going to the river, they are interested in tapping the water for their own purposes. So like that, when a community of spiritually minded people come together and they create some infrastructure, they create some resources, so that everybody can go on the spiritual journey smoothly. There are people with vested interests who come. They are not interested in spirituality. And they want to use those facilities for their own purposes. Such people give spiritual organization a bad name. So on one side, organizations, on a negative side, they can have rigid hierarchy which can interrupt the spiritual growth of individuals. It can have selfish, self-interested people who can exploit. But on a positive side, organization can also provide rich facilities for spiritual growth. So anybody can pray to God, but if there's a temple, then there's a whole atmosphere which directs our consciousness higher. And now, if there is a substantial big temple, there has to be some organization to maintain that temple. So in this world, organization is a necessary evil. And when we join an organization, if it's an organization, it's important that we remember the purpose why we are there. So we are joining the river so that we can get to the ocean. We're not joining the river so that we can build a dam and we can block that water from moving there. So if we keep our purpose clear, then the organization can become a very rich resource. It can provide us many resources for our spiritual growth.
Dear audience, as we have spent some time, we will be taking last 2 questions. One question is raised from this side, and another from this side. We will be taking last 2 questions. 3 questions. Will we be able to take all the 3 questions, as our guests are very busy, and we also need to think of their time. Let's start with that question.
Thank you. Actually, to me, the whole world is nothing but a summation of millions of chemical reactions and millions of rules of physics. Some of them are known to us. and most of them are unknown to us. The very few who are known to us, we are calling them as we are practicing science. We are the so-called science that we are calling them. We are know something about the science. Actually, these are very few millions of chemical reactions and millions of rules of physics that's happening in the whole universe. And the question is that we are calling science, and we are knowing that in a particular way of learning, and that is the way of learning through some Western methods of learning, and we are going through some schools and some universities, some colleges. Now, my question is that, so far I know you are an engineer, okay? You have dedicated yourself from engineering to the way of spirituality. I am also in a profession, but I am not telling that I am not away from spirituality, but I am practicing spirituality in my own way. But you are far ahead from me. My question is, if I also convert myself from my profession to the way of spirituality like you, so millions of the chemical reactions happening in the universe, or in the millions of rules of physics that's happening in the universe, how I can align my spirituality like you to the knowing of their chemical reactions or their rules of physics? How can I know that? That you have set some examples of science, and my teacher, Professor Julan Darshak, also have set some example of science, like examples of Newton that is falling from the tree, or rules of Stephen bodies.
Yes.
So, how can spirituality can help, or by the way of spirituality, how can you know that particular way of science?
Okay,
This is my
good question. Okay, so essentially, there is a notion of spirituality where we turn away from the world and we neglect or reject the world. Well, that is not like I talk about spirituality. We have been given some gifts, and we are going to use those gifts. So, for me, as I said, even before I was introduced to spirituality, I was interested in the power of education. And in one sense, now I'm doing what I was meant to do. I'm sharing spiritual education. The content of what I'm sharing has evolved with time. But essentially, I'm doing what I'm meant to do. So each one of us, wherever we are, we can find out what gifts we have, what nature we have in terms of what are our natural inclinations, and we try to dovetail them. And in fact, if you consider, a spiritual view is actually the most conducive for scientific research. And a non-spiritual or an atheistic view is actually the least conducive for scientific research. Why is that? Because, like you said, the universe is rich with so many laws that are unexplored. So now, if we came across, we say if we're in archaeology, and we came across some patterns on some wall that was dug and discovered after digging. Now, if we presume, oh, these are just random marks that have come from nature, then we wouldn't explore them any further. But if we knew that these are indications, these marks are scripts of some ancient language, then we focus more energy. Okay, what does this mean? What does this scribbling mean? What does this particular symbol mean? So basically, the idea that the universe is pregnant with meaning is most compatible with the idea that the universe has some organizing principle in it. So if the universe is just a random product in its entirety, is there randomness in the universe? Of course. But if the universe is a completely random product, then even the very existence of laws itself is a question. Because in the rigidly materialistic worldview, where do the laws that science is discovering come from? That is in itself an unanswered question. It's taken like an article of faith that the universe operates based on laws. But what is the origin of these laws? So that is an open question. So the point I'm making is, if we have a spiritual worldview, then we understand that the universe has an organizing principle behind it, and we can explore that organizing, the way the universe has been organized with greater confidence and greater energy. Newton famously said that, "O Father, I think thy thoughts after thee." What he meant by that is, he saw his scientific discoveries as spiritual insights into how God has fashioned the universe. So in that sense, a spiritual worldview can actually help us do scientific research. We see that it is the higher reality, it is the divine who has filled meaning in the universe. And that divine who has given us intelligence by which we can discover that. Okay?